Hey, I'm Summer.
And I'm Mike.
And we got married.
With children.
We're married 2 years now.
Blended for 11.
Like a margarita.
Yeah, baby, like a margarita.
And you're listening to the Everything Always podcast.
Want to tell them why we do this?
We do this because blending families isn't easy. There's step-parenting, co-parenting, his ex,
Her ex.
schedules, sibling rivalry,
Money issues.
custody issues.
Dating and relationship issues.
It's a whole lot of stuff.
Blended with a whole lot of good stuff.
And we're here to talk about all of it because we've done most of it.
We might not be experts, but we've learned a lot.
And we're still learning, and we want to share that with you.
Thanks for joining. Now let's go.
Today, we are talking about a really important topic, and we've got a lot of information that we're going to cover. So before Mike and I get into it, I just wanted to let you know that this will be broken into 2 parts. So this week, you're going to hear part 1, and next week, you will hear part 2. Today in part 1, we're talking about parental alienation, and we're going to be talking about the signs of parental alienation, the damage that it does. We're even going to go into cultural shifts and how parental alienation has shown up actually more because of it. There's a lot that we're going to be covering. We also have some great stuff in part 2 where we talk about how this affects children, what triggers parental alienation, and most importantly, what can you do about it? So we'll get into all of those good details, and make sure you listen today and tune in next week for part 2. Well, hello, Everything Always family. We're back.
Well, hello.
We're back for another episode, and we are in our cozy office. It's been raining. We are still quarantined at the time of this recording.
Yeah, that's right. Summer likes to refer to it as our cozy office. I like to consider it our home jail, which is where we are currently stuck during this crazy time.
Yeah. I hope everybody's stuck at a home that they love because that would be pretty hectic and crazy if you weren't.
Well, and I mean, that's one of the downsides of all the things that's been going on with this is that a lot of kids and families are stuck together, and the things that sometimes are minimized because you're spread out and you're at school and you're at work and all of those things are, man, they're in your face 24 hours a day right now.
Yeah. And it's interesting during this time, there's a lot of issues and challenges that have come up, especially for blended families and people co-parenting together. And a topic that has really come up that we have seen a lot of and have been having a lot of conversations about is our topic today, which is something we've talked about before, and we're bringing it back because conversations are happening and some people weren't even aware that they were in this type of situation. They didn't know that there was a title to it. So we're bringing it back because especially now during a time when kids are really sensitive to what's going on and missing their friends and perhaps not seeing both of their parents, it's actually a dangerous thing. And we wanted to bring it up again. So what we're talking about is
parent alienation.
Yeah, parental alienation. So today's, a lot of times we have episodes where we're talking about some serious things, but we try to make it lighthearted. Today's pretty serious, and I think it's a bit of an intense episode, and we're going to be covering what it is and what the consequences are, what you can do about it, and later we'll be bringing on an expert guest to dive into this deeper.
It's one of those things too that really can be happening behind the scenes. It's not necessarily so in your face that you're like, boom, this happened, this is going on. A lot of times, like, this is so serious and it can have such negative effects, but it's coming in little tiny pieces, right? It's like It's like that death by 1,000 wounds analogy where it's pinpricks that happen over time that lead to big issues.
Sometimes I look at it as, because it's a relationship problem, but if you've been in a toxic relationship, but you didn't realize it until years later when you were out of it, and you may have broken up or you might still be in it and you don't realize it because it's like little by little by little, there's mental stuff happening that has just become the norm. So how do you even know that this is an issue for you? Well, we kind of broke it down to really, determine whether this is an episode that you should be paying attention to. So here are some things to know if this episode is for you and you should be listening. One is if you suspect that your child is being kept from you or is being told negative things about you. Another is if your child isn't wanting to spend time with you, or if you are preventing your child from seeing their other parent. Think about that. If you yourself have an estranged relationship with one of your parents, this will definitely be an eye-opening topic for you. You could be an adult. This may have happened to you. And another is if you are feeling concerned about your child and their relationship with you or their other parent. Those are all reasons that you should pay attention to this episode and see if some of these things apply to you and if there are things that you can do. You know, one of the reasons that this whole podcast became so important to us was because of the consistent challenges we faced blending our family from the moment we met till the moment we started dating, getting serious, then getting engaged, then getting married. And all of the days since, we've been faced with challenges.
Like through all the different phases. Yeah.
I mean, a lot.
And even today, I mean, we still are dealing with things right now.
Absolutely.
In terms of, real world stuff that's going on in our lives with our kids and how we deal with raising, a family blended.
Yes. And, granted, as we've noted on our lives on social media and throughout this podcast, we've had some really great harmonious periods. But we've since learned to expect that it is a roller coaster. So we can go through this phase of everything is so great and wonderful and everybody seems really connected in our family. But that can, have its little bubble burst when something happens with one of the kids or with one of us, or there's a life challenge, or there's, a teenager having issues, or there's another co-parenting issue, not getting along. So what we've learned is that we need to be aware that it is a roller coaster and things are going to be up and down. And the more that you can accept that, the better equipped you are to handle these things in a mature way. And so we really try to seek to learn and understand and equip ourselves as best we can so that we can handle these situations. Being imperfect has led us to learning lessons, and our goal is to share those lessons with you guys. So if you've gotten divorced, if you've dated with kids, you've married someone with kids, and you have kids yourself, you know that blending families is hard. You definitely take on a lot.
And I would say for the most part, we're pretty much perfect.
And that's one of our challenges that we deal with on a day-to-day basis.
And, we always say, and, we're not experts, right? We don't have our PhD in making good families. But man, one of the reasons we wanted to do this podcast was so that we would have an opportunity to share some of the things that we've done wrong, some of the landmines that we've stepped on, and help, hopefully, people that are going through the same thing maybe have a little bit different perspective and have a little bit more information that will help them be better.
Yes.
So sometimes it's like, man, what do we do? We're literally like, what do we do in this situation? I am so like confused and have no idea. Are we making right choices? And, parenting and being in these types of dynamics can be really hard.
No, and that's why this became so important, because we know that there's other people that want to hear, at the very least, that you're not alone and somebody's going through it as well. Because truth be told, often there are no solutions, and we have to deal with situations as they are and try to do our best, see the best in it, and have a healthy perspective. Because sometimes there is, hey, here's what you do for this situation. Sometimes the actual solution is how are you going to cope? What is the best that you can do? Because you can't control other people. And these issues, don't end because kids are older or they become adults. The obstacles keep coming, and
sometimes like the damage that was done when they were younger doesn't surface until years and years later.
So true. That's why we're encouraging, you as an adult, you might go, well, that's not my situation with my kids, but think about the relationship you had with your parents. I mean, I have a friend actually who's in her 40s and literally just a couple of years ago realized that this was her situation. And holy cow, did it really dramatically change the relationship she has now with her mom that had been damaged for many, many, many years. just, we'll get into all of that and what that looks like. The key here is why this is so important to us is that there are things that happen, with kids as they're younger, and it doesn't end like, oh, you know what? They're fine now. They seem to be quote unquote fine because they're teens or they're adults. It doesn't, sometimes these things surface later. And really our goal here is to make you aware of it. And, there's a lot that we share here, and there's a lot that we don't because of privacy reasons. So whether a topic directly relates to us or not, we completely empathize with it.
Yeah.
We definitely empathize with it. And today's topic happens to be something that we've seen so many times. We have seen it within our own families. We've seen it with our friends' families. We've definitely seen it through our audience. And it's a common one that people will write in about. And I honestly think, as it keeps coming up, Mike and I have said, maybe this is a topic that isn't being taken as seriously as it should. People think like, you know what? Oh, my kid will realize this as they get older, but they might not. And so our goal today is to start to awaken those that may be a victim of this, those who might be inflicting this. And with, as with a lot of truth that we discover in our lives, sometimes you have to become aware of it in really small doses and accept that it's even a possibility before you can do the research and heal. And our hope is to achieve that tiny glimpse of awareness with you today. So here's what we've done for today's episode on parental alienation. This stuff is really important to us for many reasons. And so I have done tons and tons of research. It's actually something that I've researched for years when I realized it was a thing. And I've condensed it together to put the most pertinent information into this podcast for you. Note that all of the resources that I got from this are cited in the show notes. So everything that I am talking about comes from an expert, whether they are an attorney that specializes in this, whether they are a psychologist, a psychiatrist, a therapist. It's all referenced in our show notes. I'll also reference it throughout the episode. Here's how we're going to roll this out for you. I'm going to talk about what this looks like, what the signs are of parental alienation beyond what we mentioned at the beginning of the episode. And then I'm going to talk about the damage that it's doing to the child and what that looks like and how that comes out. And then what triggers parental alienation and interesting culture shifts since the 60s and 70s and how that's come about. What the child's role is in parental alienation. And then we're going to talk about possible solutions and what we can do if you're like, oh my gosh, this is definitely something that I need to be aware of. And this is something happening within my family. I'm going to go through all these things. Mike's going to chime in as he sees fit.
Some are so good at actually getting detailed information out. It's pretty amazing. So.
I do. I love finding facts. I'm a total fact finder. I love doing research. When I hear...
And she's so passionate about it. I will tell you, just to give you a little credit, it was this last weekend and we were having this conversation and then you started reading about it. Then you watched a YouTube kind of video a little bit about it. Next thing you know, it's 6 or 7 hours later. And I'm like, what are you doing? She's like, you have no idea. We have to talk about this. This needs to be our next podcast. It's all about this stuff that's super, super important and is really dangerous and people need to know.
Well,
So thank you for spending the time.
Oh, well, thank you, baby, for appreciating it. Well, the thing is that, we've had conversations with friends. We've had conversations with people. We've seen it. We've seen it within our own family. I mean, I've had conversations with my, people in my family who are step parents and who have gone through this stuff. And it breaks my heart because these people that we've had conversations with, the kids are, late teens, early adults even into their 30s. And the damage that it's done, brought me to tears, literally, with how troubling it is and how it could have been avoided. And I just think, gosh, a whole child's life dealing with this. And the parent who was being alienated, or even maybe the parent who was alienating from someone else, didn't realize they were doing it.
Because sometimes it's human nature. And it goes back to that whole thing of man, stop being terrible.
Yes.
But in this scenario, it can be so undercover, you might not even know you're doing it.
Right.
And you're doing terrible damage to your kid or
Yeah.
kids.
So let's dive in. First,
Signs, right?
signs. We're going to talk about the signs to look for if your child is a victim of parental alienation, or if you are a parent who is a victim, and maybe, just maybe, if you could be someone who is causing this. Some parents really do this without even realizing it. And even further, some parents know they have done this and have stopped by the grace of awareness, emotional maturity, or whatever epiphany they had. I have seen that too, which is amazing. However, it is so important because even though it has stopped, it still continues to cause damage. That is so important. And please hear that. Even if you're someone who's like, you know what, I might have been preventing my child from seeing their other parent. I've learned that it's bad. I'm going to stop. Believe it or not, we've had people that have reached out after one of our episodes when we have said, please stop negatively talking about your child. Here's the damage it's doing, who have owned up to it, which is like amazing. And like, praise you for just having that maturity to do that. You have made a significant life change in your child's life. And I think it's so awesome. But I think it's still really important to be aware that even though you have stopped that behavior, it does still continue to cause damage, or there is damage there and the consequences are lingering. And it's really important to understand what those are, especially if you are seeing those consequences and want to make a difference. So let's talk about those signs of parental alienation. If you have concern, look, just keep listening. So, things like your child is avoiding visiting you. Your child is also avoiding visiting your side of the family. Perhaps your child is showing a great deal of anger towards you without reason. Maybe your child is always siding with the other parent. Your child does not want to talk about good memories of your times together. Like, hey, remember when we hung out and did this? Nope, they don't want to talk about it. So here's Ann Manning, an expert at Colorado State University, described a typical scene of what parental alienation looks like. A bitter divorce and custody battle over a couple's 7-year-old son. Awarded full custody, the mother, perhaps seeking revenge, sets out to destroy the son's relationship with his father. The mother tells the son lies about the father's behavior, plants seeds of doubt about his fitness as a parent, and sabotages the father's efforts to see his son. The son begins to believe the lies as he grows up, and his relationship with his father becomes strained. Obviously, we're never going to name names, but we have discussed this with people. And it's so crazy because we have people who have not seen their children, not only, a strained relationship, but haven't even seen their children until the children have become adults and finally reached out. And then the parent learns all of the things that were being told, all of this essentially brainwashing that was going on. Yeah. And they didn't get to experience, critical years of their children because of it. And it's, so you might hear this and go, oh my gosh, that was me. So this is parental alienation. In 1996, Kenneth Waldron and David Joan wrote a book, and they described the long-term adverse effects of parental alienation syndrome and what it has on child development. They argued that in the parental alienation context, children learn that hostile, obnoxious behavior is acceptable in relationships, and that deceit and manipulation are a normal part of relationships. So look at that in signs, or if you're not having a relationship with your children, is there hostile attitude coming at you? Is there manipulation? Is there deceit? Canadian Justice Martinson in 2010 pointed out that children who are victims of parental alienation have difficulty forming and maintaining healthy relationships in adulthood and are at high risk for depression, suicide, substance abuse, antisocial behavior, enmeshment, and low self-esteem. We've talked about enmeshment before on our podcast, in case you're unfamiliar with that word. Enmeshment is really like hardcore codependency. It's like you are just, what's a good way to describe enmeshment? It's like it's like talk about helicopter parenting. It's like that to the extreme, but it's like you just are everything that your child does, you are on top of them.
It's very similar to the word when people talk about like codependent relationships, right? Where
Right.
you're like all tied together. It's more where you can't disconnect. You can't give them space. You can't release.
You're not letting them be an individual. Exactly. Right. And we're actually going to go into that a little bit more.
Hey, thank you so much for listening to our podcast.
Yes, we appreciate you so much, and we hope you know that we support you in whatever stage you're at.
We took a leap here, sharing our mistakes and wins with you.
Yeah, we're getting pretty vulnerable here, but we know that we've learned from those who have been brave enough to share with us, and we want to do that with you.
Hey, can you do us a favor? If you like what you hear, will you press pause and rate the podcast and write a review?
Oh, and while you're at it, share it, please.
And if you have questions, you can find us on all of our social channels.
Okay, ready to get back to it?
Let's do it.
And this leads me into the next part and why this form of brainwashing, as it's called when it comes to parental alienation, is dangerous and what those consequences are. So again, I'm going to reference a lot of experts here because they say it better than I do. But back in 2005, Dr. Ann Baker, who is a parental alienation expert, did a qualitative retrospective study on the long-term effects of parental alienation on adult children. And in this study, she conducted semi-structured interviews of 38 adults who had been child victims of parental alienation. And she identified several problematic areas in these subjects. Here's what she found: high rates of low self-esteem to a point of self-hatred, significant episodes of depression in 70% of the subjects, a lack of trust in themselves and in other people, and here's what's interesting: alienation from their own children in 50% of the subjects, which suggests that parental alienation is multi-generational. So they're learning this and now they're bringing it onto their own relationship with their children. Pattern continues. Here's what else her study showed. Approximately 1/3 of the sample reported having had serious problems with drugs or alcohol during adolescence. Totally makes sense. You have low self-esteem. You feel bad about yourself. What's the fastest way? Escape. And, of course, this person told me I should do this. I'm going to do it. Feels good. Let me just keep doing it. Using such substances to cope with painful feelings arising from loss and parental conflict. And that's something that's important, is realizing that there is a loss. So even though there's going like, oh, I hate that other parent because I've been, manipulated or brainwashed to hate that other parent, there is still a feeling of loss. Don't think that just because they're showing, I don't like dad either. Don't think that there isn't a feeling of loss happening.
Loss and guilt too.
Right.
I mean, and it's so subconscious that literally you don't feel it on the outside, but it's like burning you up on the inside.
Absolutely. I think before I continue on with what Baker found in her study is that just because you're not seeing certain things on the outside or things appear to be fine or that somebody is coping doesn't mean that those feelings don't exist deep down. And we as parents, as hard as it is, are so responsible for understanding, for really seeking to understand what our kids are going through and to have empathy. You might hate your ex, but that is a totally separate relationship from what your child gets to experience with them. And it's really none of your business unless they are in danger. And that other parent, by the way, might not match up your glorified version of what they should be, but it still doesn't give you the right to come between that. Because we've said this on previous episodes, your child is the one that gets to make the decision about how they feel. Don't brainwash them into about how they should feel about someone else. So back to Baker and what she found. With these adults, she found that these adults that were victimized as children had difficulty trusting that anyone would ever love them. 2/3 had been divorced once, and 1/4 more than once. Her respondents reported that they became angry and resentful about being emotionally manipulated and controlled, which actually, the fact that they realized it, because I believe, and I'll talk about this also further into the episode, I think some people might go their whole life not realizing that this ever happened to them, which is really dangerous. And so how do you ever heal from this? And that, again, this is why the purpose of this episode is to just make you aware, because you can't heal from something or make changes until you are first aware that could possibly be happening. They reported that this negatively affected their relationship with the alienating parent. So not the parent that they were being alienated from, but it negatively, in the end, affected their relationship with the parent that was alienating them from the other parent.
That's right. Bad deeds will come back to you. It's just a matter of time.
Just a matter of time. No, and you don't know how it's going to come out. And if you're not aware of it, it could come out in some ugly ways and where you're like, I don't even know why I have all this hatred. That's why we're hoping that people start to understand. About half of Baker's sample reported that they had become alienated from their own children. And she reported that while most of the adults distinctly recalled claiming during childhood that they hated or feared their rejected parent and on some level did have negative feelings, they did not want that parent to walk away from them and secretly hoped someone would realize they did not mean what they said. So that is so important right there, which is what I was saying earlier, is that while they remember saying that they hated the other parent and that they did have negative feelings, they didn't want that parent to walk away. And this is so important for those parents who are being alienated. Do not give up. You will feel like so many parents will say, well, she hates me anyway, so I'm just fine. Let her be with her mom. Let her be with her dad. If she hates me so much, then I'll just be out of her life. But this study has proven that as much as they said they had that hatred or had that negative feelings, they did not want that parent to walk away from them. And they secretly hoped that someone would realize that they did not mean what they said. So important.
That kind of gives me chills.
Doesn't it?
Bit, right?
So don't give up. Please don't give up.
As hard as it is, remember that you're the parent. You have to be the one that does the outreach. You can't just sit back and be like, you know what? Fine. If they don't want to be, or they don't want this scenario, whatever.
We have a good friend, semi-good, whatever, a close enough friend who did that, who did not give up and even went years without seeing his or her children. I don't want to get too specific, but they reunited. She did not give up. I just said it. It's okay. No one knows who this is. Someone who had become a friend, and it did not give up on this, and those it paid off. And yes, there's stuff to repair,
remember,
but it paid off. So don't give up.
These
don't
are
give
your
up.
Kids, they're worth it.
That's right.
You may not be getting that instant gratification, but stick with it, because someday everything will be, everything will be known.
Yes,
it's like that whole thing. Like, don't give up.
Don't give up.
It'll be worth it.
So there's a book called Children Held Hostage: Identifying Brainwashed Children, Presenting a Case and Crafting Solutions. This was written by authors Stanley S. Klawar, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, and Bryn V. Rivlin. They pointed out that not unlike the human immune system and disease, in the case of parental alienation, we find similar outcomes in terms of degree, but no matter how resilient, no child is totally impervious to its harmful effects. So the reason I'm bringing this up is because, as I said earlier, in the case of you haven't given up, you're reunited, or your relationship is starting to repair, you still need to be aware of the harmful effects that come out. Because it's just like they said in the book, just like any kind of human disease, you may have recovered from a certain disease or something that has happened, but there's still harmful effects that linger. If you've undergone treatments, like hardcore treatments for a disease, your body, there's consequences to that.
These are the side effects.
These are things that will linger. And to be aware so that you have that empathy and realize, okay, but now, she knows the truth. So shouldn't things be fine? No. And if you've been in an abusive relationship, or you've had strained relationships with your own parents, or any kind of, damaging relationship, that even if things are on the repair or on the mend, there are still side effects. And so this is a list. It is a list of harmful effects of parental alienation. But just look at these and just listen and see if any of these match anything that you see in your own children, anything that you see in yourself and in your situations. Here they are. Loneliness, conflict with parents, depression, sleep problems, substance abuse, speech problems, sexual promiscuity, poor body image, poor eating habits, eating disorders, weight loss, weight gain, disheveled living spaces, poor executive function, meaning disorganization, diminished activity, psychosomatic distortions, feelings of isolation, increased use of technology as an escape, lack of friends, sibling conflict, sometimes including violence, heightened fantasy life, diminished attention span, social identity problem, regressive behaviors, anxiety, conflicts in peer relationships, school dysfunction, and memory loss.
That is a terribly long list of bad
things. It is a terribly long list of things. And really what they, in my mind, again, I'm not a doctor, but what they all correlate with is low self-esteem and poor coping mechanisms. And which is so clear to me, why wouldn't you have all of those feelings, especially if you're feeling rejected? Because just remember, like, just because, if you're talking negatively about somebody else who created you, somebody that you actually want to have a relationship with, and you're leading this child into believing that that person is bad. First of all, there's feelings of rejection. Well, why, you're telling me that this person doesn't want to, that I'm not important to this person. That's what you're telling me, which is going to make you feel bad about yourself if you're not important to someone. Of course, you're going to have those feelings,
Yeah.
And you're having that feeling of loss because you're like, why does that person get to have a good relationship with their dad, but I don't? Of course, you're going to have those feelings. Just really be aware of, what's causing those. Do those feelings even need to be there? Take a breather here because I know this is an intense episode.
Yeah, it's like, man, usually we get a little break with something light, but this is
no, but I think it's just really important. So I wanted to share this story that I found during my research because it shows really how dangerous the effects of parental alienation are. And when I say dangerous, I mean
for real dangerous.
For real dangerous. This is serious, and all of those harmful effects that I just went over are really serious, but it's what they can lead to. Expert attorneys, Lorandos Joshi trial lawyers who specialize in parental alienation cases cited this story. A number of years ago, a senior and very well-informed psychologist was treating an alienated young man for severe depression. In the process of the treatment, it became clear that this young man had been alienated from his father when his parents separated and divorced some 15 years earlier. In the process of his treatment for depression, he reconnected with his heretofore alienated father. In doing so, he began to realize that the many negative things he had not only believed, but also acted upon about his father were simply untrue. The effect of the insight was overwhelming and disorienting. His sense of his betrayal of his father was so profound that he simply could not tolerate it and integrate it with his old sense of self. As a result of these dizzying revelations, he committed suicide. Now,
and that's years and years and years later,
mm-hmm.
right? And it's like
his parents had divorced 15 years earlier. I kind of want to go into interesting reasons why this might be happening. So anyone who has gone through a turbulent divorce or custody battle, even years after the divorce, people have custody battles and are still having, things that pop up, flare-ups, and because of disagreement about something or other. That there's a ton of emotion and controversy that gets stirred up. And, it's custody over the children. It's about money. It's about different parenting styles. And all of that really can bring out the ugliest parts of people. So I thought it would be interesting to look a little further into culture and what has changed and how this might impact even more parental alienation today. Like why it might be happening more than it used to. So there was an article written for Divorce Magazine by Dr. Jane Major, who I believe I sent an invitation out to be on this podcast, which would be awesome. We'll see what happens. But I do have another expert coming. But she discusses the changes since the 1960s and 70s that really caused a dramatic shift in our parenting culture. And she wrote that in the 60s and 70s, feminists told fathers that they should take a more active role in raising their children. So women were going to work, they were going back to college, pursuing careers as they never had before. I'm sure all of you listening recognize this. You are some of these women. And a shift then began, and fathers became more involved in the day-to-day care of their children. And this was, happening a lot more than previous generations, where it was dad went to work, mom stays home and raises the kids. And as rigidity about parental roles began to fall away, the tender years doctrine was still in place. This doctrine presumed that by virtue of the fact that a woman was the mother of a child, that she must be the superior parent. So in the early 1970s, several states passed a no-fault divorce laws, where anyone who wanted out of the marriage was free to leave. And some have called it the no-guilt laws. There was a proliferation of divorce that was historically unprecedented. After a family breakup, many fathers wanted to continue to be involved with the care of their children. Now they've gotten used to being in the day-to-day life. Suddenly, they were finding that they had no legal right to have custody of their children unless the mother agreed to it. So think about that. It's like you're in this time where there's this, no guilt law, parents are getting divorced, but fathers were having a more active role than they used to. But the law is still kind of going, mother is superior, mother's superior. Probably why there's a bunch of, since then, lots of attorneys that literally are all about father's right. There's big father's rights movements. But anyways, let me get back into this.
Different time though.
Different time, right? So,
flash forward.
Mm-hmm. So joint custody then became, actually, let me back up here a little bit. So what happened is there were lobbying efforts from James Cook, who is the founder of the Joint Custody Association, and he was caught up in this problem himself. And the California legislature successfully passed the first joint custody laws. That's like not that long ago, but I mean, it seems like a long time for us. But that's like, right before or around the time we were born. Our lifetime, yeah. So joint custody was now widely seen as a better way of handling the evolving problem of how to share child custody. It was believed that it would lead to fewer fights over the custody of children because it was more equal. And other states also passed these joint custody laws. And these laws helped to level the playing field for fathers. The majority of mothers and fathers welcomed joint custody, but others did not. And as with any trend, we all know this, there's backlash. So child custody became a highly political, gender-specific issue. And thus, this totally ramped up the high level of disputes that began in the 70s. So in a lot of states, in most of the states, that presumption of mother knows best was now replaced with in the best interest of the child. So if you've gone through divorce, which if you're listening to this, you most likely have, and you've gone through the custody, determining custody, the courts will say what's in the best interest of the child. And courts will say joint custody. The best parent is both parents.
Right.
Now, in the 1980s, courts began to increasingly ignore gender in determining child custody. So this removed the automatic allocation of all custody goes to the mother. So now she was having less time with her children. And instead, courts were looking at how the custody could be shared. And if that wasn't possible, then judicial officers attempted to determine which parent was more interested and better able to attend to the best interest of the child. So fathers were perceiving that they were at a disadvantage because of the bias towards the mother having custody. And so because of this, in the 80s, more fathers than ever started showing up and doing parenting classes and making sure that their skills were like, yes, I'm going to prove that I'm going to be an awesome father. You know what this reminds me of? It reminds me of Mrs. Doubtfire.
Yeah.
It's like, I'll do whatever I can, and You think of that movie, actually, just think of that movie if you know the whole plot and how, he's like doing everything he can to show that he can be a great father, to the point where he's like, I'm still not getting enough time. So I'm going to be the
nanny.
Scottish nanny. Was it Scottish or Irish? Scottish.
I think she was Scottish.
Yeah. Anyways. Yeah. That's a great movie, by the way.
That is a pretty good movie.
Revisit that movie.
Now that we're staying at home, that might be a
good movie.
Look up and rewatch.
It's so funny, and it just has good messages, and it's another, there's just so much good stuff in there as I remember it. So now fathers are like really trying to brush up their skills. I need to prove that, I deserve as much custody.
Yeah.
Most parents were at this time, more and more parents were able to share custody of their children and work out childcare, because now you've got mothers and fathers working in a lot of these situations. So a lot of women were actually relieved. Like, cool, I've got my co-parent here who's going to, somebody's got my back. We're going to share in the childcare, and I can actually pursue some life goals and dreams and actually have a career. However, there were also the people that didn't have a friendly resolution to custody. And fathers were now finding themselves like with a greater opportunity to gain joint or primary custodial status by going to court. The stakes got even higher when the legal system was used to resolve these difficult problems. And in extreme cases, the alienation of a child's affection against a targeted parent became a bizarre escalation of the intensity of the conflict. Okay, so before I go into the child's part in parental alienation, because that's kind of what I'm going into, I just want to discuss a bit about this article and some things what it made me think about. Because when I read this, it made me think of a common reason that I hear mothers, in particular in this case, alienating or denigrating father in front of the child. And this is just, I know this goes both ways, but it made me think about this.
These are examples?
These are examples because, as the article noted, it was now more common for a father to take on a lot more of the roles that in the years past were mostly up to the mother. And now you've got like joint custody happening. You've got, shared responsibilities. And it made me think, especially in our time frame now, many mothers and fathers are working, and fathers and mothers are equally sharing household duties. So I'm thinking of this and I'm like, it's another reason why a mother in this example, it can go both ways, though. I'm just trying to keep it simple. But in a divorce case, could actually start to be angry if a father isn't putting in as much time as the mother. So maybe you do have 50-50 custody, but his job requires more travel, or he's not able to make every game. His work hours go into 8 o'clock, so he can't go to, certain things, but he's still doing the same work that he did perhaps when they were married. But now because they're sharing, she could be upset. Like, you should be doing more. Look at these other fathers that are doing more. And it just made me think that, I don't know, what are your thoughts on this? Because I think we've talked about this in an episode before, where I think sometimes the denigration and the alienation starts to happen because mother thinks father isn't doing enough, or father thinks that mother isn't doing enough.
This is such a complicated thing because you've got gender roles, which contribute to like some of this stuff. You've got expectations and a general desire to want to think of that person that you're going through all these issues with in a negative light. You want to find reasons. A lot of times you want reasons for justifications for the reasons you're not together, or, you have resentment for,
totally,
you took our house, or you have, I have to pay a lot of child support, or it could be situations like, hey, my husband cheated on me. And so like, screw him. I'm,
right.
Whatever the things are that are leading you to have the resentment, they're there and they're prevalent.
Right.
And, when it comes to raising children, it isn't always equal. You may have a court ordered thing that says, hey, your time is 50-50. But you know what? Efforts sometimes are different. Mm-hmm. It might be the situation that, hey, you know what? Timeshare is 50-50, but the man is required to make enough money to pay for the child support and the things. And to make sure that the kids can do activities. It could be vice versa, to say that it could be that in the scenario where maybe the man makes significantly less money and has to contribute more because he has more time. Every person's situation is different.
Yeah.
But the effects of the negative talk, the bad talk about the other are real.
And I'm so glad that you're saying this, because in this moment you might be going, maybe I have done that. Have you said, well, you're just not that important to your dad, that's why he didn't show up to your golf tournament, or he had to go on this trip and it was just more important than your whatever activity it was. Now, what can you do as, on the opposition, so that you're not fostering this feeling of you're not important? Could it be that there's all these other things that father steps up to do? Could you actually say, this actually has nothing to do with you? Is he calling to see how it went? Is he checking in with you? Dad has to work a lot, or dad had these other obligations, or vice versa. Mom's trying to build this career right now. And so this event was really important that she go to, but I'm going to be there for you. Making it kind of, I had both of my parents, and there were times when, my dad had to be on a work trip and he's so super involved, and my mom was there, or my mom had, this big, event thing that she was going to, and my dad was there. And sometimes it was an important thing, that I wanted both of them to be there. But if one of them was there, I was super stoked, and nobody was saying it's because you're not important to your dad. I think that's unfair and it's unnecessary, especially, when the other parent is doing so much to actually show how important they are. So don't, it's important to think about, don't manipulate it into a situation of turning the child against the parent unnecessarily.
Simply said, just don't say negative things.
Yeah. And
to
also
your kids about the other person ever.
Right. And also, are you glorifying what this ideal perfect parent looks like and constantly comparing to this imaginary person? Examples like, well, at Jimmy's house, Jimmy's dad takes us to the beach and we go boogie boarding. Cool. How many times have you done that? A couple times. It was fun. It was super fun.
Why can't you
do that?
That takes the kids boogie boarding.
But maybe you have done that, but you're glorifying something else. So, it's all about this compare. We do that to ourselves as parents. Like, oh my gosh, she's got it all together. She makes lunches. Look, the mom that makes homemade lunches every day, that is so awesome. If you don't have time and your kids are buying lunch, that does not make you any less of a loving, caring parent. It's things like that. And when you do that comparison, and and you're framing that in the child's mind of
even little things, right? That scenario where, you're at your kids, whatever it is, and you might say something like, it would have been really nice had your mom been able to make it. It's too bad she has to work so much.
Yeah. Yeah.
What did you really say? You're not a priority.
You're not a priority. Right.
And
that is so that well, and I've heard, here's the thing. I've heard parents say in front of their children, well, they're tired. Mom just lets them go to bed. It doesn't matter what time it is. It's like 11 o'clock at night or whatever. We like to have a healthy, because we care about the kids, saying it in a way that's just like,
it's leading.
Come on, because she has a later bedtime,
it's
or
the
because
1,000 cuts, because it's these little things.
Digs that form.
And you know what? If it only happened one time,
mm-hmm.
and it was like the only time it ever happened, it probably wouldn't be a big deal. But it's the little ones,
the little consistent
that come at different times and at different things.
You are shaping the way that they think, and which is the definition of, it's brainwashing, it's manipulation to a disadvantage too, because you think, so many parents will go, oh, well, I'm just saving them from an awful parent, or he's such a jerk, or this or that.
I just need to let them know what's really going on.
Yes.
Yes. I do that.
Now, but mind you, and we said on other episodes, if your child is in danger, there's actual abuse going on, that's a totally different thing. And you have to get like law enforcement and legal things involved. But this is actually, if that is not happening and you're just clearly just don't like this person, or they don't match up to what you think is the ideal parent,
the kids out of
leave
it.
the kids out of it, then you are actually this is actually abusive.
Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to part 1 on our discussion on parental alienation. A really tough topic. And I know that this is, one of those things that's not that fun to talk about, but thanks for tuning in. Make sure you stay tuned for part 2, where we're going to be talking about triggers, possible solutions, the role that children actually play in this problem, and possible solutions to how you can, make things better or hopefully, reduce the effects of parental alienation. So stay tuned for part 2.
Thank you so much for listening to our podcast. Our goal is to bring you all kinds of value that will help you navigate these challenging waters of blending a family.
Reach out to us if there's something specific you want to hear.
And don't forget to like, rate, and subscribe to the podcast.
And if you really like it, share with someone you love.
Ooh, and be bold enough to share it with someone you don't.